I have a dog. And all my clothes, even though I brush them, I keep finding his hair, like on my clothes. I can't get rid of it.
I know, I have 2 cats.
You do? Yeah, you know what it's like then, eh? It's a nightmare. Okay, let's go.
Yeah, the first question is about Beijing Film Festival. Have you seen any great films in this festival, and what are they?
I've seen some great films, and the thing that was surprising to me, I didn't really know much about the Beijing International Film Festival. Let's start again. It's okay, yeah, but because these things are really sensitive, so let's start again. I didn't really know much about the Beijing Festival before coming here. I live in Shanghai, so I know more about the Shanghai Festival, and I've been a judge at the Shanghai Festival. But I have to say that I was pretty surprised by how powerful this festival was this year. And when I say powerful, you know, you judge a film festival in 2 ways, really. One is by the films that they attract, and 2 is by the people that those festivals attract. Now, clearly, this is not a time to be attracting people to come to the Beijing Festival because China is still under very stringent COVID restrictions. So, you know, it's very hard to come to China. People don't want to do quarantine, and I understand that. But the films that are here are really impressive, and they are from all over the world. There are a lot of very small festivals around the world who call themselves an international festival because they get one film from the Netherlands, and you know that's an international festival. This is really an international festival, and legitimately so. There are films from South America, North America, all across Europe, all across the Middle East, and some very good films from India. So for someone like me who's a film buff, I mean, I live and breathe film, and one of the things that's a little bit more tricky in China is looking at international films. To see 16 movies that are in competition here of a very, very, very high standard, most of them from overseas, is both surprising and very, very gratifying. So I think this year the Beijing International Festival has taken a huge step up. And what I look for now is next year, when hopefully COVID restrictions have become historical memories and nothing more, so that people will come to China and come to Beijing and come to this festival, and they can continue their tradition of respecting and giving a voice to international filmmakers. Beijing deserves to be on the map, and this is a very good step, I think.
Okay, thanks. And let's talk about you. What are your next Chinese stories?
You know, we can't really talk about me, we have to talk about we, and I don't mean this because there's no false modesty in saying that. I don't speak Mandarin, and I'm a filmmaker working in China, so obviously I need a huge amount of support and expertise around me, because otherwise I'm a pair of eyes, but I'm not a voice. And I can't be a voice, not knowing the language. So I have a very strong team of people around me who help me to get through this society and kind of interact with Chinese society. What we have decided to do as a little company, we have a little boutique company, is try to broaden the impact of our films. So we're not just making documentary films, we're also now making theatrical feature films, which can travel abroad. It's very important. One of the things I've been saying all morning to various kind of interviewers is that the power of film is often underestimated, and the power of film is huge. It's soft power, but soft power is still power. And I don't think you can change the world with film, but you can change people's opinions and prejudices through film. If you think back 10 years, who knew anything and who was interested in the culture and the kind of popular culture of South Korea? No one. Suddenly, South Korea is punching way above its weight because it makes terrific movies, because it makes terrific pop music, and it has global influence. And that's not thanks to the South Korean government. It's thanks to the popular culture industry, which is so vibrant and so creative and relentless. It's not that they make one good movie, they make 3, 4, 5 great movies every year. China's perfectly capable of doing that, but it's not doing it yet. But that's what I think I can slightly help with, because I can make Chinese stories, but I can make those stories, I can package those stories in a way that we can show them and have a receptive audience in the West. And I think that's a kind of an important bridge that I'd love to see more people doing it. I'd love to see more Chinese people doing it, Chinese film directors. So what we are doing now is we're trying to take some of the Chinese stories that we've encountered, real stories from documentary research and so forth, and repackage them as feature films so that we can sell them in the West and hopefully foster more kind of dialogue and a more kind of tolerant and nuanced attitude from foreign audiences to take China seriously and not to be suckered into believing all this kind of anti-China rhetoric and propaganda, which is utterly politicized and I think very corrosive.
You have spent a lot of years in China, and how do you view the Chinese film market now, including production and exhibition, etc.?
I think the great golden years of Chinese film were in the 90s. I mean, that's when I was kind of exposed to a lot of great Chinese movies. Those early Zhang Yimou films, for example, which I still remember. And I think those years are behind us now. Obviously, things have changed. And I think there's more of a kind of reliance on genre movies here than ever before. I don't think that is necessarily a bad thing, but I do feel that there needs to be more oxygen given to young Chinese filmmakers, because I think clearly there's a huge amount of talent in this country. 1.4 billion people means that you can find some great producers, directors, actors, cinematographers. But they need encouragement. And I think I don't see that they are being encouraged as much as I would like to see. I wish there was some kind of national program where, young directors could be guaranteed an audience in a certain number of cinemas. I mean, lots of countries have those kinds of mechanisms for keeping their domestic culture alive. But then you need to give the opportunities to Chinese filmmakers. And it seems to me that there could be more oxygen in the creative community so that more films can be made. Because if you can make more films, you can send them globally. Film is an international language. What happens to Korean movies? Now, everybody in the world thinks Korea is kind of the holy grail of filmmaking and innovation. And God bless them for doing it. There's some terrific movies being made, but it's a little country, and this is a big country. It's got a very diverse population. I'm sure you could find lots of really interesting filmmakers, and that would help China. And maybe so people, some people say, well, you know, we don't need help. We're okay on our own. But I don't think that any country that lives inside a bubble, even if it's a huge country like China, I don't think it's healthy to have a kind of inward-looking ecosystem. We all exist in a global village, and I think it would be fantastic if people knew about, understood, appreciated, and admired what the Chinese people have gone through, what they've achieved, and if they understood where China was headed by looking at stories of ordinary Chinese people. So it's just a personal opinion. I don't, you know, I've no idea whether that could happen. I could be dreaming, but that's what I would like to see.
Thank you. I agree with that. Yeah. And you have spent some time in BBC, right, making films. And what do you think that how can BBC reform and innovate for its future film production? What do you think?
You know, I don't know enough about what the BBC does now to be able to, I mean, I could give you an opinion, but it would just be pulling kind of disparate ideas out of the ether. I do know that BBC Films still do a fantastic job, and they do punch above their weight. They make some marvelous films, and they have great taste. But for me to express an opinion about the BBC, I think it would be presumptuous on my part, because I don't have neither the education nor the standing to really know what's going on at the BBC these days. When I was there, it was in a different time, a long time ago.
You said your films are for the Westerners to know the real China, right? And how do they think your films are? Is there any, you know, how do you view some criticisms of your film?
When I started making films in China, I came in 2013. I started shooting in 2014. As we were preparing that film, which was called Better Angels, Trump was campaigning to be President of the United States. Shortly after that, he was elected. He had as one of his primary goals the scapegoating of China as a nation and as a culture. And he did a very good job of it. I was making a film, coincidentally, at exactly the same time as his presidency, that was advocating a better relationship between America and China, a way that America and China could coexist. And not necessarily be friends or allies, but at least not be at each other's throats. And we were looking at a lot of the similarities between China and America, and how in so many ways they're much closer to being alike than being different. The problem was that there was a very viable anti-China propaganda campaign that never stopped. It was relentless for 4 years, and it did a very good job of poisoning the well of making China a threat, a global threat, and that has not changed. That is the kind of pervasive opinion held by the political establishment of most of the Western countries. So, notwithstanding that there is a lot of kind of anti-China feeling, some of it I probably deserved. I'm not a kind of staunch defender of China, right or wrong. I mean, every country makes mistakes. Every government makes mistakes. I happen to think that on balance, what the Chinese government has achieved kind of outbalances any kind of any mistakes that they may have made. But that's my personal view. What I try to do is tell the truth as I see it. And maybe I see it incorrectly. Maybe I'm just a kind of a cockeyed optimist, a kind of someone who is naive. I don't think so. I've been in this country for a long time. I see it for what it is. And I try to tell the truth about the Chinese people and what they've experienced, what they've gone through, what they're living through, and what their hopes and dreams are in these present circumstances. And I don't do it with a lot of facts. I don't do it with rhetoric. I don't do it with statistics. I'm not a big fan of journalistic filmmaking. I do it through emotion. One thing that I've said a lot, and I do firmly believe it, is that if you watch a movie that moves you, if it reaches your heart, it doesn't need to reach your head. You will remember it for the rest of your life. And I think that's what I try to do with films. I try to kind of bypass this and go straight to this. And if we can do that in films, we can reach foreigners who may be skeptical, and they may be, you know, vitriolically anti-China, but when they see that the Chinese people are very much the same as they are, with the same hopes and dreams and fears and anxieties and aspirations, it's very hard to hate people who you understand. You can't shoot a bullet at someone who you admire or you think is very much like you, unless you're, you know, a psychopath. And hopefully, you know, not too many psychopaths are watching my movies, because what's happened here in the last 40 years has been historic by any metric. It's a transformation of a nation which has never happened on the planet before. And whatever we may think about the Chinese government, they achieved it with the help of the Chinese people. 1.4 billion people working hard every day to achieve something which was quite remarkable. And anyone who comes to this country, you know, they're here 20 minutes and they look around and they get it. They get what has been achieved. And so what we do is we just, you know, I mean, it's a cliche, you tell it like it is. You don't gussy it up with a lot of kind of rhetoric and flourishes and grace notes. And all you do is you show the unalloyed truth. And it's pretty remarkable. It's not perfect, it's not nirvana, there's huge room for improvement. But that's what I'm trying to do, is I'm just trying to give more nuance to the conversation and balance things out a little bit so people are a little bit more open-minded.
Cool. Thanks. Last question. What are the key areas of film collaboration between UK and China? What do you think?
I think film collaboration between UK and China is pretty close to non-existent, and I really regret that. And I'm trying to do something about it, actually, weirdly, because there's a chap who used to be a professor at Cambridge University, a man called Joseph Needham, who lived for 99 years. His life spanned the 20th century, and he was a complete eccentric. He was like in the tradition of great British eccentrics. One of the things he achieved over the course of his life was a book that he wrote, with some help from a couple of other people, called Science and Civilization in China. He basically wrote the textbook on what China's contribution to science had been over the last 4,000 years. And what's very interesting is that, and it's totally his, you know, because of his efforts and his work and his open-mindedness to China, Needham discovered that a lot of the things that we in the West think that we invented, we didn't invent. The Chinese got there about 100 years or 500 years or 1,000 years earlier. And so there's this wonderful, I mean, it's a book written by an academic. It's not a page turner, unless you happen to be interested in China. But he wrote this book, and he reset the intellectual community's understanding of China's contribution to global civilization, and it was immense. He also had because he was a ladies' man and he was a bit of a devil and he was an adventurer and he came to China during the war. He lived this marvelous, larger-than-life existence with China at its center. So what we want to do is we want to make a series of films, a mini-series, a dramatic series of films about his life, because he was an odd duck and a marvelous character. I mean, a fantastic character for an actor to play. But what he achieved during his life was also historic. And so a great British writer, a man called Simon Winchester, who is a kind of, for me, a national treasure. He's a wonderful, wonderful historian and writer. Simon wrote a book called The Man Who Loved China, and we're turning Simon Winchester's book into a mini-series, which I think will be a great way to bring China and the UK closer together. I'm you know, I would love to see more co-productions. That will be a co-production between the UK and China. We want to foster more. I mean, we all know the British film industry is, you know, kind of, is a law unto itself, and there are some absolutely great storytellers and filmmakers in Britain. Britain, of all the countries on the planet, is the one that punches far above its weight. And I would love to encourage British filmmakers to come here and look at it. And this is a country that hasn't been photographed. It hasn't been in popular fiction. It hasn't been given anything like the attention that it deserves. And you know, you can have so much fun and make such great movies in this country. So I would love to see that happen more. I'm just, you know, I'm a little voice in the wilderness a bit right now, but hopefully that's going to change in time.